Hello and welcome to the Everyday Icons podcast with your host, me, Graham Locke, where I get to know the people behind the success stories. My guest icon today is Sebastian Bates, founder of the Warrior Academy and the Bates Foundation. Seb is an entrepreneur, mentor and best-selling author. Seb, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, you've got an incredible backstory, and I'd really like to touch on some of that before we get into the more sort of juicier stuff. Tell me a bit about your childhood growing up, the start of your journey into becoming the person you are today, and the lessons perhaps that you learned, or the skills that you developed as a child through adversity or things happening to you as you sort of went on in life. Tell me how it all started for you.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in the southwest of England, into a military home. Dad was in the army, Paras Marines. Mum was a physiotherapist in the NHS. There were 4 kids, so quite a busy house. All of us were massively into sport and, go on adventures and outside all of the time. The classic kind of 90s coming home when the streetlights come on type vibe. Going on adventures and challenging ourselves was a huge part of my childhood. I'd spend the weekends climbing tanks, going on assault courses, watching my dad jump out of planes. We moved around quite a lot. So I kind of grew up in Bristol, then in Aldershot, and then moved when I was about 7 to Wiltshire area. For about 4 years after we moved, I was bullied really badly. Lots of psychological bullying, then physical bullying. Ended up starting martial arts as a result of that, which basically mentored me through bullying. And I realized just how powerful martial arts could be as a community, as a direction, and as a self-development tool to help young people through massive transitions in life. So I guess one of the first big lessons I learned in childhood was going through that bullying, right? The other big lesson I learned through childhood was how much you can grow and develop from seeking adventure. So those two key learnings and lessons in my life as a child certainly fueled what I then did as I kind of grew up, right? So when I was 16, I joined the Royal Marines Reserves. So I was in training in Bristol, training in Lympstone with the Royal Marines kind of every Wednesday, every weekend while I was doing my A-levels. So from 16 up until I was 19, I was in the Royal Marines. And I grew up very, very quickly. Like all my friends were in their 30s. I had, 20, 30 big brothers. And that meant socializing like I was a 30-year-old. That meant training like I was in my 20s or 30s. And the people I surrounded myself with were 15 years older, right? So that made it quite difficult to feel like I was a student in school, because the second I left school, I was basically an adult. So I grew up very quickly with that, to the point where when I was 18, all of my friends went to Afghanistan and with the Royal Marines to serve on tour there. And I realized that I wanted freedom and I wanted to explore the world. And so what I did is I decided to go to university in Denmark to study architecture.
Okay.
It was free to study architecture in Denmark, or free to go to uni in Denmark if you were in the EU. It's a bit tricky now, sensitive subject, we don't have to talk about it, Brexit. But yeah, essentially, I went to Denmark, studied architecture after I worked there for like 6 months as a chef. And then I studied for about a year. I realized very quickly that traditional education was not for me. The idea that I would have to spend the next 6-7 years studying really put me off. I learned a lot of the language, which was quite good though. So I managed to pick up Danish socially, which was quite useful. But eventually I left. About a year into the course, I left. I bought a one-way ticket to India. And I started traveling around India. I had about 400 quid in my bank. I created jobs wherever I went. So I started in India. I was sleeping rough on sleeper trains across India in the north and the south, and then went to Asia, Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, and Malaysia. I would create work, create opportunities to earn money. So I would go to the docks as a 19-year-old in Vietnam, find 10, 15 tourists, bring them back to the hotel I was staying at, fill out the whole hotel, and then get free accommodation for a week. I was doing fire shows in Thailand. I was competing and fighting professionally in Phuket. I was doing all sorts of random things. At one point, I was a monkey chaser in India, chasing monkeys out of a hotel with a broom. to get free accommodation. So you can start to see, right, where the creativity of coming up with ways to make money to live I started to understand that. Obviously, it wasn't sustainable. The thing about these sorts of jobs is they've got a shelf life, right? Like if you're a good monkey chaser, you only last a few days and the monkeys have gone. So I realized that, it was time to move back home. I wanted to do something physical. I didn't want to be in an office. So I decided to become a personal trainer, which is what I did. And my first gig as a personal trainer was taking over a rundown inner city gym Thai boxing club. And in that gym, there were sort of 15 to 20 young men, I'd say 16 to 18. And this room was filled with testosterone. They just wanted to fight. And the guys in there, mostly, they were going through some really difficult things at home. Drugs, alcohol, domestic violence. They were thrown out on the streets by their parents. They would come in a state, every week. And it was often quite challenging for them to kind of see past their circumstances, right? Mm-hmm. But very quickly, within a year, I realized that the transformations that I was seeing with them were really in their character. Right. So they would come in, they would bow as they entered, they'd call each other sir, they would park their shoes, they weren't fighting at the weekend, they weren't drinking at the weekend. And within a year, we had a completely different group of young men. And so I really decided to focus on even younger children from that stage. I realized that if I could make that change in their life, what change could I make if I'd found them when they were 5 or 7 or 10 years old? And so that really was the birth of the Warrior Academy.
So that was when you first realized perhaps that you could make a business out of it, or was it never really business first? Was it you just wanted to help these kids and see where you could go with it?
I guess it's both, really, right? Like a really good business when you're an entrepreneur is something that you care deeply about, because if you don't care about it, you're not going to last, right? So something you care deeply about, there's something that's entwined with your origin story, why you actually exist, the adversity you went through. So for me, that's overcoming adversity with bullying, or the challenges I went through, when I was a young teen, managing Royal Marines and then academics, or understanding and having that sense of adventure from a young age. So it's all this kind of coming together, which for me is character development, right? And what character development is, to me, is basically self-development, but it's this focus on soft skill development over academics. And so for me, it's one of the most important things that we can teach young people, but it's often misunderstood. It's often neglected within the educational system. If you look at the educational system we've got, it's component labor, it's memorization. It's very much, learn this thing and we'll assess you based on your ability to memorize it and on your academics, right? But we've got our kids in school for 6 to 8 hours a day. They are focusing heavily on academics rather than their soft skills. And so I wanted to create something that would work alongside education and academics. Yeah. And really develop their character. So yeah, that's where the passion of the drive came from for that. And then once I realized how needed it was in the market, that's when things started to take off from a business point of view.
So you sort of got this business mindset about you, and it's a question I often ask my guests on this podcast is about entrepreneurism. Is that something that is that can be manufactured, or is that something that is within you and you're born with it and it comes out of you like it's done with you? I guess you didn't realize what you was going to create back then.
Yeah, for me, I never met an entrepreneur, right, until I was like 21, 22, 23. My dad was in the army, my mum was in the NHS, so government jobs. The only entrepreneur I may have met was someone managing the post office. And again, that's more of a sole trader type role. So you could argue it's less entrepreneurship than other kind of businesses. I guess the question is, are entrepreneurs born or made, right? And I don't think it's as simple as that. I think it's a grey area. I think it's both. I see entrepreneurship, entrepreneurism as a set of skills. So you have a set of skills that make you a good entrepreneur. You can learn those skills.
Right.
But everyone's got an innate ability to be able to implement those skills.
Yes.
Right. So some people have a higher tolerance for risk. Some people have a higher IQ. Some people have more energy. Right. And so there are certain things that I think if you've got the certain cards in your hand and you leverage those cards with entrepreneurship, you'll do really well with entrepreneurship. There are other people who don't have those cards, but they work really hard and they learn the skills and they become great entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
You look at the unicorns, they've got the cards, they've got the nurture, they've got the nature, and they were in the right place at the right time in the world.
Yeah.
Right? You were born in America, in Silicon Valley during the .com era, right? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there are so many factors at play for you to become that unicorn entrepreneur.
So you need a bit of luck.
Yeah.
And timing and this kind of, and I believe in fate. I think, you know, things are meant to be sometimes. And I accept that in life sometimes. I'm not as young as I once was. And I think when I was younger, I used to chase a bit more, but now I'm a bit more, okay, if it's meant to be, I'll let it be. And I won't chase things that aren't meant to be kind of thing. So in terms of luck, is there one moment in your life that you look back on and go, that was really lucky and you wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for that moment?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I got heavily into extreme sports. So I started skydiving from the age of 21, 22. Did about 500 skydives and base jumps around the world. Eventually got into base jumping. As I started getting into base jumping, which is jumping off bridges or cliffs or antennas with one parachute instead of two, often much lower height, the fatality rate is 100 times that of skydiving. It's basically a completely different sport.
Right.
As I got into base jumping, I then got, you know, deeper and deeper into this sport, and things for me escalate very quickly. As soon as I think I can do something, I do it, and then it just kind of compounds, and I end up taking that one idea to the extreme very quickly. So I ended up becoming a wingsuit base jumper. So we're doing terrain flying. It's where you jump off, and instead of using the wingsuit to get away from the cliff, you jump off and you start to follow the cliff along. So I'd be hiking in mountains in Switzerland with a group of 5 or 6 friends from all over the world. And, you know, then we would get to an exit point. The clouds would kind of create this gap. You'd just be able to see it. There's a 1,000-foot drop. You'd suit up with a wingsuit, jump off, 6 of you all going together, and you'd follow the cliff along until you go through a waterfall, peel right, and then, you know, get away from the cliff and open up safely. But that lifestyle was so extreme. It was so beautiful. There are very few things I've seen in the world that could ever compare to flying a wingsuit through a waterfall at 120 miles an hour with 6 of your friends.
Wow.
In the Swiss mountains. How do you compare that to anything in your life? You know, you've got the courage to do it. You've got the feeling of doing something so extreme that's such an intensity on the senses, but you've also got the beauty of being in the nature and the camaraderie of being with your friends and so on. The problem with that, of course, is you can't just live that life and get all the benefits and the positives without the negatives. There's a real dark side to extreme sports and to base jumping in particular. You know, I had a really bad accident. It was my 7th jump of the day in Switzerland. Jumped off the cliff. As I pulled open the canopy came out fine, but I was quite low and I was headed towards telephone lines. So I had to make an emergency turning. The problem was my left wing was, the left zipper was stuck, was jammed. And so I couldn't use my left arm to make a turning. So I had to use my right arm to pull the left riser down, which turned the canopy 180 degrees. The problem with that is the canopy turned so quickly and aggressively, it basically collapsed. And so I fell 50 foot. I broke everything from the waist down. I managed to survive the jump. Statistically, up until about 40 feet, you've got a fairly decent chance of survival. There's something like a 60% chance of survival. But once you get to 50 feet, which is where I dropped from, you know, your chance is like 10, 15%.
Right.
So I managed to survive it. My head hit the floor so hard, I kind of bounced back up before I kind of crumbled. Both legs broke, both feet broke, both ankles broke. The tendons blew off my left foot and kind of shriveled back up the legs. They had to try and fish them back down. The heel bone exploded, shooting shards of bone up the leg as well. It took about 2 hours for me to be found, to be given any morphine at all. And eventually I was taken to Interlaken Hospital. And they basically said to me, I'll never walk again.
Right.
It was a 2-day road trip to get to the UK so I could get surgery. The UK surgeons did the surgery, woke up, came over to me and said, yeah, you'll never walk again. That'll be it. So I was 24, professional fighter, martial arts, business, teaching full-time, extreme sports athlete, and told I could never walk again, basically permanently disabled. that was the situation where I would probably say to you, yeah, I certainly felt very lucky. What made that worse and made me feel more lucky is for the 2 years where I was trying to rehabilitate, I was watching all my friends jump, and for over a year, in the space of about 12 to 14 months, I had 15 close friends die. And so I was
from extreme sports,
from base jumping, yeah.
Wow.
So I was in this situation where all the guys I was jumping with over the next year, one by one around the world, were just losing their lives to this sport. And it was almost like God sent me to my room and said, just pause what you're doing right now, and I want you just to watch how your life could unfold.
Yeah.
So I've got a profound sense of, I don't really like the word luck, but a sense of gratitude.
Yeah.
I think for a long time that wasn't gratitude I felt. It was almost like survivor's guilt that I felt. Why didn't I die? Essentially, because, they weren't taking as big risks as me. I was known within the community of taking such big risks. And miraculously I survived. But people who were so much more conservative than me were taking, smaller risks and losing their lives.
So did you decide after that to stop?
No. No. As soon as that happened, I was thinking, when can I jump next?
Really?
Yeah. So I was at, yeah, that's not my character. So
do you still do it?
No.
Okay.
There was a very good reason I did stop, but it wasn't straight after. So I met my wife 3 months before this accident. So I met her 3 months before, and then, she met this guy who was super active, professional fighter, extreme sports athlete, all this sort of stuff. Wouldn't leave the house without a parachute in the boot. Great. We had loads of dates, great fun. And then suddenly, I'm disabled. For the next 2 years, I couldn't walk really. So I was using crutches for about a year. As soon as I came off crutches, I was walking with a limp, and all the nerves had basically died in the left foot. So I couldn't feel my foot. I even asked the doctors to remove it because it was just a case of it was holding me back so much. I'd rather a prosthetic foot than what I was doing. Anyway, the reality is I wanted to get back into base jumping. I kind of reached this point where I was like, I'm not going to get any better. I'm in constant pain every day, all the time. I'm on all the painkillers. I might as well base jump, even if it means, limping up to an exit point and jumping off, which is what I did. And I did a couple of jumps in Italy, but I was very strategic. So I jump over water. So if there was a problem, I could land in water. I mean, it's still a base jump, don't get me wrong, but it was safer landing, if you like. And then I found myself on an exit point in Sweden. The weather was so bad, we had to climb back down. It was snow everywhere. It was a two-hour hike to get up. And the reality there was, it was such a dangerous jump that if I did it, I think I would have died, and I think that kind of win saved my life. I always say, it's sometimes the jumps you turn down, they're the ones that are the most important, right? And I've always said, if I didn't feel 100%, I wouldn't actually do it. But yeah, so after that, that was 2014, I had the accident, 17th of July. And exactly 3 years later, my daughter was born on the same date in the same hospital that had the surgery.
Wow.
At exactly midnight.
Wow.
And it was such a profound feeling for me, because I remember going from, we weren't even expecting her, so it was such a shock. And then to go from not having any kids and to trying to reclaim this base jumping life that I had, to then holding this tiny living thing. And you're a dad, you know what it's like when you hold your child for the first time, and in that moment you literally change.
Yeah.
Whoever you thought you were, it changes.
Yeah.
Right? And it's this incredible opportunity to evolve as a human being. And the kids bring out this amazing version of yourself. And I remember saying to myself that I can never jump again now, because I think if I was to jump again, maybe not the next jump, maybe not the jump after, maybe 10 jumps, maybe 20 jumps, maybe even a couple of 100 jumps, but she would lose her dad, and this girl would grow up without a dad. And so that is the feeling I got, and I didn't seem to care anymore because I was on a new adventure.
Yeah. Wow. So is it fair to say you was what they would describe as an adrenaline junkie back then, and you had to get that fix, or did you feel like when you stopped doing it that something was still missing in your life to get? 'Cause, I mean, that feeling. I mean, how do you replace it? And I think it's a really interesting question. for people that are really successful in business? Do you think something of that adrenaline went into your business mindset and you're looking for highs all the time?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I've been diagnosed as an adult with ADHD, and I grew up in the era where you wouldn't ever get diagnosed with ADHD, right? Like you would, especially if you could do all the exams and you could concentrate for long enough, and you didn't necessarily have the sort of ADHD where you're inattentive and you can't concentrate, which I don't. The ADHD I've got is more to do with spontaneity and impulsivity and my tolerance to risk, right? And so I'm very much on that side where I don't understand or feel risk in the same way as most human beings.
Right.
Right. And so, that's
a superpower now though, right?
If you can channel it in the right way, it's one of those things. All the mentors I've worked with have said to me, this can be like your kryptonite, or it can be something which you can double down on and it can really benefit you.
Yeah.
So I can take that energy and that tolerance of risk and put it into something like extreme sports, and then I can end up massively shortening my lifespan. Or I can put it into something like entrepreneurship, and I can understand and look at risk totally differently. Have a very different perspective about how to mitigate risk, understanding when to follow through with things, when to go for things, when not to go for things. And so there's so many benefits from it. I think for a lot of people, ADHD can be really debilitating. But for some people who are very lucky, they're able to capitalize on some of the strengths with it. And so yeah, I think neurologically, we talk about nature and nurture, and this is one of the things I found. I've met so many entrepreneurs who do have ADHD, and I think that the reality is neurologically they've got an advantage in many ways when it comes to the tolerance of risk, being calm under pressure, good in a crisis, this sort of thing that's really hyper focus, providing that you've got ways in which you can manage it as an adult. Which I think if you're late diagnosed, you do. Yeah. You actually find ways. I speak to a psychologist, and they'll be like, all these little things you've done in your life are just ways you've managed ADHD, and it's fascinating for me because I've worked with so many kids with it. Yes. But I never even considered it for myself.
Yeah, that's incredible. And you mentioned mentoring. So what age did you get your first mentor, and why did you feel that you needed one at that point?
So I've had great mentors throughout my life. Obviously within martial arts, there's very much like a mentoring position that an instructor has with their students. It's a very tight bond. They're not just there to teach them a sport, they're teaching them life lessons. And, you go through this evolution as a human being when you go through martial arts. And that instructor helped me transition through loads of difficult things in my life, adolescence, bullying, this sort of stuff. But then as an adult, it took me a while to get a mentor. Actually, like I said, I didn't really find any entrepreneurs around me. I grew up in the countryside. Yeah. The only reason I started a business was because I really wanted to work for myself. I liked the creativity and the excitement of doing it. I figured out I was fairly business minded. That's what I called it when I was younger. Actually, I remember having this, I remember reading some text messages to my mum when I was 19, 20 years old, backpacking around Vietnam. I just bought a motorbike in Vietnam, and I drove it across the country. And I said to her, look, I messaged her, I think it was an email. And I said, I'm dropping out of uni. I've realized while I'm traveling that I'm really business minded and that I can create jobs or work for myself wherever I go. I guess that was what I was referring to, was I felt like I was entrepreneurial, but I didn't have a word for it. Whereas now it's a cool thing to do, right? Yeah. Like I was just not aware that was who I was. And so in terms of mentors, I didn't really have one growing up. And then I started a business in the southwest of England in the countryside before entrepreneurship was really a thing. It wasn't really a cool thing to do. Unlike here in Dubai, everyone's an entrepreneur, right? Or at least they call themselves an entrepreneur. Yeah. Until I was about mid-20s, I think I was 27. Then I found my first kind of proper mentor. And at that point, then, everything changed, right? I actually had a structure to this learning and this process, and I had a blueprint to follow on how to actually grow and develop a business, which was amazing. So our business went from, teaching a few hundred students in the UK to, a multi-7-figure organization teaching in 9 countries around the world within 5 years, with the largest martial arts academy in the Middle East.
Incredible. So you must have learned so much. I always say, because I did okay at school. I middled everything, basically.
Yeah.
7 C's, like the perfect C middle student. I used to spend most of the time staring out the window. So I'm probably undiagnosed with something, right? Because I was born in the 70s. Like you say, you didn't really get
No
diagnosed
chance,
back
yeah.
then.
Born in the 70s, no chance.
I
Yeah,
got
crack
lots
on.
wrong, but I don't know what they are. And I just found that I just wanted to work. I just wanted to learn. And I started my first business, I think I was 27, so I was quite late to it. I had a 10-year career in the financial markets in the city. I hated office life.
Yeah.
I just couldn't stand being in an office. I felt so confined. I needed to go and find myself. And when I started my first business, which went from nothing in a garage all the way to having 2 big offices, 100 staff, 7 figures, blah, blah, blah. It was the best business course, looking back, doing that. We raised finance and we had venture capital people in our world and all this sort of thing, bankers and all sorts. And it was just the best experience best business course I could ever go on.
Yeah.
And and it's interesting because the point I'm making is you talk about education and the soft skills and really learning if you can spot something inside a kid that's business minded, like you had, if you can just put them in the front of the right person at the right point in their life, they could reach such highs so quickly.
Yeah.
But I will learn on the tools as such. But is that what you did? So it's obviously starting a business because you feel that you're business minded and you've got a good idea. But then for that to go across continents, countries, different legislations, different ways of setting up businesses, admin issues. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I started a business in Dubai and I found it quite difficult because there's a lot of different components to it that you have to satisfy.
Yeah.
Who taught you that, or did you just literally learn by mistakes? You just followed? Did you Google it, and how did you actually? Because that's a serious business that you've got it to.
Yeah.
It wasn't without its challenges, right?
No. So I've had a great mentor called Daniel Priestley for a long time. I did the course with him and Dent in 2017. I wouldn't just say I did the course. I did the course like 4 times. Paid for it once and then just went over the same material again and again and again. When I first did the course, it was really expensive for me. And so I just doubled down on that, right? And so I implemented everything so much until I got to a point where I'd done everything in that and then went to the next thing, did everything in that. I think for me, the key thing has been implementation. A lot of people obsess over motivation. I just don't do that. And I actually don't trust when I get motivated. If I feel motivated about something, I'm always a bit dubious, like I'm going to make a mistake. I feel like it's a bit of a foolish energy. I'm much more excited when something comes across my table and then I'm on it for like 12 hours, getting it done, you know? My focus is an output rather than trying to learn new things all the time or become... Some people absolutely love just learning and learning and learning, which is great, but then learning becomes the sport they're in. Yeah. Right? That becomes the activity because it fills them with this feeling like they're doing something. Yeah. But reading a book isn't doing the thing, right? Talking about it isn't doing the thing. Planning your goals isn't doing the thing. The only way you can actually do it is actually just implement and do the thing.
Do the thing.
And so this obsession of implementation over education for me is really key. I think that a lot of people could pick up most business books if they just educate themselves a little bit and then implement that, 10 times over. Yeah. They can achieve so much more than if they just read 10, 20, 30 books. And some people, they almost brag about how many books they've read. And I did when I was younger, when I was like 16, 17, 18, I used to read so much, a book a week. But as an adult, after doing a bunch of the business books and the self-development books and all this sort of stuff, I guess my focus has changed so much away from that now. And it's just implementation. Yeah. Like I already know now a lot of the stuff I need to do, right? And I look at entrepreneurship like a team sport. Like for me, entrepreneurship is not doing everything myself, right? And it doesn't mean... if I look at my team in the Warrior Academy, we've got some incredible people in the business. If it's just me, the business can only be so good, right? And so I'm now at the stage where it's my job really is to find talented people that I get on with who really believe in our mission and vision. Yeah. And if I can get those people in the same room, that's when the business takes off. And so I'm just really excited about what we're doing and how that's evolving and what that looks like, because it's a different way of looking at business, right? Yeah. Yeah, I think it's that focus, laser focus, which the best performers that I've met and interviewed and been lucky enough to be in my life, they're so focused because there's so much noise out there. Yeah, I think more noise now than I've ever known in my life because social media wasn't the thing when I was younger. It is massive now.
books, training courses,
Yeah.
mentors, angel investors, I think the procrastination stops so many people, like you just said, from actually doing the thing.
Yeah.
And going, let me just try, let me just get started. They don't get started. And they read a book by, I don't know, Richard Branson, Gordon Ramsay, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, the list goes on, whoever you like. You can't become them, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Like, you can read bits and pieces, but you're never going to take all those skills and go, oh, I'm now the result of all these great people, right?
It's not even that complicated, right? Business isn't that complicated, but we overcomplicate it because we're not ready. We think we're not ready because we've got imposter syndrome. We think there must be something else that I need to learn before I can do it. But actually, the reality is if you just started, you'd have so much more success.
Yeah.
You know?
And a question about social media. What's your relationship like with social media? Do you think it's a necessary evil in many respects? Because my kids spend too much time on their phones. I have to lock their screen time now and things like that because they just death scroll TikTok or Instagram videos and they're consuming so much content. I worry about their mental capacity to cope with all this. And then I think they often get into a bit of a mood about it. And it's just children, but I've seen it also in adults that look at Instagram and go, oh, my life's a bit shit. Because so-and-so's got this massive house or this new car or boat or this, that and the other. And they come away from it completely deflated. But I use it for business. I've always found LinkedIn is a really good platform for me in business world. Of course, I look occasionally at lifestyle stuff, but I try not to get deep into it. How do you block out all the noise? Because I guess you being quite high profile means that people want from you and they want to be involved in what you're doing, or they want to go, oh, Seb, I've got this great opportunity. Do you want to get involved? How do you consolidate all that noise around you and how do you keep that laser focus?
I think it's, for me, I try to be very authentic. I don't really have a separate business or personal account. I have one account. I post about me and my family frequently, what I'm doing with my family. I think that if you are congruent within your life and your business and the things you talk about in your business and what you're actually doing in your life, if I look at me, it's adventure, it's overcoming adversity, it's leaving the comfort zone and doing challenges, right? And then it's being a dad and it's, struggling, balancing entrepreneurship and fatherhood, and it's trying to be a good husband and a good dad and a good friend at the same time. And then it's the health side and really focusing on training and pushing myself with that. And I think if you look at my profile, that's basically what you see, right? And so, and I think it's really important as an entrepreneur to have that, to build trust. I think people want to see a founder who's transparent and authentic with what they're doing. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult because you don't necessarily want to be creating content. And, the last thing I want is to be famous. For some people, it's a real drive for entrepreneurship. I would say for some people, there are so many people who want to be an entrepreneur to be famous. Like I'm an entrepreneur because there's no other option. That's just all I do. I don't know how else to live. Yeah. Right. In actual fact, I think, I've met a lot of famous people. I've got friends who are famous and I look at their lives and I don't envy them at all. It gets to a certain point where you then, if you imagine, fame and freedom, right? Or fame and freedom. You got the more fame you've got, the more money potentially you've got. And then you get to the stage where it's like, okay, now your freedom has reached the pinnacle. And then it starts going down as you get more famous. Security becomes an issue. The more attention you get, the more threats you get, all these sorts of things. And so I'd hate to be in that position. I don't think it's an enviable position to be in. And I think that we often look at entrepreneurship like that. I secretly really like entrepreneurs who do it kind of undercover. You meet people now and again and it's just, they've exited their businesses for 10s, 20s, 30s, millions of pounds or whatever. And, they're running massive charities or they're involved with massive projects, but you don't really know. Yeah. I think that's so cool because it really is just a completely different way of looking at entrepreneurship. And obviously it's not the traditional modern way of doing it, but a part of me, there's something nostalgic about that, which I just quite like. Yeah, no, I agree with you. They're the smart ones. And you talk about balancing everything. I suffer from dad guilt, husband guilt, friend guilt, all that kind of stuff. And always challenging myself. Am I good enough at being a dad? Yeah. There's no handbook. You can't chat GPT, which unfortunately doesn't give you the answers. But how do you
I guess two questions. One, how do you make that switch from entrepreneur to dad, husband, friend, family member, whoever it may be? And do you think you're doing a good job at it, or am I unusual for always criticising myself for wondering if I'm spending enough time? Am I doing enough for my family?
Yeah, I don't think you're unusual to doubt or criticize yourself, especially when you're balancing a lot of things. I think that there's a balance to be had between selfish ambition and understanding what we're actually doing for our kids. And I think that a lot of people, they say they're out there working really hard. I'm doing it for the family. I'm out, I'm putting in 14-hour days. I'm doing it for the kids so they've got a brighter future. Your kids just want you. They just want your time.
Yeah.
And that's the reality. And people might take 20 years to figure that out. There's a balance to be had, because if you're around all the time and the mum's around all the time and the dad's there as well, and it's just like both of you always there, then it gets to the stage, well, it's really healthy for your kids to know that this is what it looks like when adults are out there trying to pursue their goals and their visions and their dreams, right? This is what hard work looks like. This is what sacrifice looks like. This is what it looks like to try and balance building a family and creating something incredible in the world, right? I think for me personally, I feel like I've got a good balance. I have a very strict routine with what I do. So, I'm up early every day, 4:30, 5 a.m. I tend to walk for 2 or 3 hours in the morning. The first hour and a half is before the kids get up. And then I see them for breakfast before they go to school. And then, I do another 2 hours walking while I'm working as well. So I've got a walking pad under the desk and I'm just, walking away while I'm working. I'm then there with my wife, go to the gym with her for an hour, do some more work. And then I see the kids after school and so on and so on. At the weekends, I'm pretty much with the kids and my wife all the time. So I built my life around that. I've got an amazing assistant, and I'm very protective of my time. Yeah. Because whenever I say yes to something, it's saying no to something else, and that's normally no to the family. So someone needs to have a really good reason to speak to me or have a meeting with me, or they want to have a coffee with you or whatever. Everyone wants to have a coffee these days, right? But it's like, there's got to be a really good reason for it. Can this just be a voice message? Can this be a phone call? Yeah. Does it have to be a meetup? So I try and do everything remotely. I do a lot of my work, like I said, from the office at home. I pretty much don't use emails. Someone sends me an email, I'll screenshot it and send a voice message back. Right. And I think that's quite unique and quirky. But if it's your business, you make the rules, right? So yeah, that's how I choose to live. And I think that rather than sending a long email, dear so-and-so, here's the answer to your question. Kind regards. Just there's an extra level of formality with emails. I just skip all that with a WhatsApp. Hello, mate. Yeah, here's the answer. There you go. And I think that's different to how some people work, but it works for me. Yeah. And it means that I'm very efficient with my time and I can balance loads of things. I mean, if I look at us right now, we've got 70, 80 staff around the world. We sponsor like 4,000 vulnerable children in some of the biggest slums in the planet, in India, in Africa, in Nepal. We're in the favelas of Rio with the Bates Foundation. We're everywhere around the world, right? And so I look at the Warrior Academy in the UK operating, and then the UAE. We're expanding. We've got 18 offices here. Within 3 academies, we're opening up another full-time academy. There's so much going on. Wow. You could easily get overwhelmed by that. Yeah. So I've got loads of ways in which I prevent myself from getting overwhelmed, which I think has helped me as a dad. Certain things like trying to slow down the point at which you get some news and you make a decision. So that I call it just slowing down the decision-making phase, because oftentimes you're an entrepreneur, right? And you're having dinner with your family and suddenly, bang, some bad news comes in. In your head, the dinner's basically ruined. We've all been there. You got some terrible news, some HR issue or some financial issue or a logistical nightmare or whatever it is. And now you're in problem-solving mode. Yeah. But you're sat there trying to be present, but you're actually solving problems at 150 miles an hour. I try and slow down decision-making to buy myself time so I'm not reactive, but also have this process where I try and sleep on big decisions. That really helps. And then just having an amazing team around me who protects my headspace. I've got an amazing head of operations who does a great job of dealing with issues finding solutions before they even get to me.
Brilliant.
And I think if you can, especially as the business grows, right, where you get to that point where you've got 20, 30, 50 plus staff, and you can't do everything. So you need people around you who neutralize threats as they come in. So that you're making these decisions from this abundance, positive mindset, not from this scarcity, reactive mindset. And for me, that's just so key.
And interestingly, I guess when you're growing your teams, I'm going to hazard a guess that you don't look too much at the CV.
Yeah, I'm not a CV guy.
I might be wrong, but I get the impression you'd rather just go. Oh,
I mean, CVs are really interesting, right? Like, I think CVs are great because they give you an insight into what someone wants, how they want to be seen. So I like to look at it from that point of view. There's certain things within a CV where you can really tell if someone's reliable or not, you know, and reliability is really key for me. So there's certain red flags that I've got. You know, one of the things I'm not that interested in is what degree you've got, right? It's, you know, I need to know that you've got the right background. But if I'm hiring a martial arts instructor, you know, before they even get to us, where we make a decision, they've been shortlisted by their credentials, right? So now we're just dealing with the top tier of potential. But yeah, I mean, you know, we're a character development organization. I feel like we can assess character quite well. When someone walks in, you know, what's their body language like? What's the language like? What words do they choose? What's their eye contact like? You know, what sort of questions are they asking? Have they done their homework? Are they using their initiative from day one? All these little things, I think, which for me, again, that's character development, right? Like if you develop someone's character, they know that. And
do you see everybody that before they come to work for the Warrior Academy, or do you sign people off still? Or you stepped away from that?
I used to up until I would say 6 months ago, and then I've stepped back from it a little bit more.
Okay.
Obviously, with really key hires, I still do that. But for some of the entry level positions, I don't do it as much. I'd like to say I'm one of those bosses who, you know, every single little thing that comes through the door, you know, it has to be signed off by me. I'm not like that at all. I don't micromanage at all. If you look at my team, one of the things they love is the freedom they get, right? I hire really good people. I put them in places where they've got responsibility, and then every month I'll check in and make sure they've done it to that level or exceeded it, right? And I just think it's trusting people, trusting the right people. If you've got a leadership team and you still want to sign off on everything, I think you're stunting your business's growth.
Yeah, completely agree. It's all about trust, isn't it? And building the right teams and the right people around you with different skill sets that complement what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
Mental health is a really good topic, great subject. No one's safe from it, no matter what background you're from or how successful you are. Everybody can get struck by that moment where they go, oh, I've been wobbled, or I'm feeling something new that I haven't felt. Even someone in their 40s, 50s, 60s can feel something really dark for the first time, right? Have you ever picked up on that yourself through your journey where you've had days where you thought, I'm not feeling right and I need to speak to someone, or this is a new feeling? And does it still happen today where sometimes it might just creep up on you? Or do you think you're mentally fit that you can cope with those sort of days? Or moments.
Yeah, do you know what? I think entrepreneurship is like extreme personal development. You get to know yourself very quickly, very deeply through this process of trying to build a business, right? Come up with an idea, stick it into the marketplace, see if people like it, get rejected 100 times, scrape your way through, still standing up, do it again, get rejected again. You have to be mad to put yourself through that because it's such an assault on your mindset. And I think that, you know, entrepreneurs develop some thick skin over time. These successful entrepreneurs can handle a lot. I think that as a society, we've got a negative understanding of pressure. I think pressure is really good. I don't think that we ever reach our full potential without lots of pressure. I think that the pressure that we are willing to experience and take directly correlates to our success in life. And I think that our focus shouldn't be on removing pressure. It should be on coping with pressure and teaching young people very early on how to cope with pressure. So mindfulness, meditation, breathing techniques at the very core of what we should teach, right? Yeah. And then it's having a deeper sense of awareness, understanding your emotional state, being able to label and talk about your emotions, these various different things so that you can actually articulate what you're feeling rather than just internalize it. Yeah. Especially for young boys. And so I think that should be our focus, right? So then if you ask me personally, yeah, I've had some really up and down times within entrepreneurship. I remember sitting in a van after finishing loads of classes in loads of pain, from arthritis after this injury, having a newborn daughter in the house, just moved away from an abusive neighbor to a new home, and having the weight of the world just crushing me. Financially, not doing well. Logistically, things are a nightmare. And personally, just completely overwhelmed. And it's this heavy feeling that feels like you're being crushed, literally being crushed, and you can't breathe. And I remember having panic attacks in the van. I didn't even know they were panic attacks. I just thought for some reason I was out of breath. And then I later realized that's just a panic attack. And so, you know, I think even me, and I see myself as a fairly resilient bloke. Like, I've been through a lot. Yeah. Right. But to be in that position, you know, professional fighting, extreme sports, all the stuff I've done as a young person, to be sat there and just running out of breath because there's no space in my lungs. That's what it literally feels like.
Did that frighten you?
Yeah, it frightened me. I guess so. I think I've had an amazing support network throughout the kind of key years of entrepreneurship in my wife. Right. And so, you know, I've been able to do amazing things because I've had an incredible wife who's just been there to support me throughout the whole thing. And there are so many things that someone who's really close to you picks up on, and they can be there to nurture you through those difficult times and difficult moments. You know, an unhealthy relationship looks like someone putting more pressure on. Yeah. You're right. And a really healthy relationship looks like someone they don't necessarily give you the answers, right? But they just find a way of creating peace in your life. Yeah. If I'm out there, you know, trying to push the business, trying to grow what we're doing, and I have this idea and this vision, it's coming home and then experiencing peace. And I think that's really rare in a relationship to have. And I think that's what we've got. So I would say that's been massively helpful for me.
And you think your sort of army background and your discipline in martial arts helps you to stay grounded, fit and healthy mentally, as you know, on top of it, as much as you can do? Do you think all that training has really given you an amazing core to cope with things and just be aware of yourself? And because some people, they make it big and it all gets too much for them, and they go off and, you know, have that lavish lifestyle and end up doing things they shouldn't be doing, and they're just chasing highs all the time. So do you find it quite easy to stay grounded? You got a wife, 3 children as well. Yeah, I guess they all keep you your sanity, right?
It's interesting. Like, I would say we're very genuine, down to earth people. We come from the countryside. If you know, I want to spend most of my time in the mountains. That's my happy place, right? So, I mean, I'm going to spend the next 4 or 5 months mostly in the mountains, skiing, heli skiing, doing this sort of stuff. I try and be in nature as much as I can, and I love, you know, being in adventurous sports in nature, because I just feel like it's such a visionary point of view for me to have that, and it fills my head with kind of space. I think that as a family, we really invest in experiences over things. So we travel a lot with the kids. We invest that time and energy and planning into not buying things, but exploring the world and taking up challenges and seeking adventure. And I think that really brings you down to earth. And alongside that is the charity side of what we do. I would say, you know, a third of my time nowadays is on the charity side of what we do, right? So within the Bates Foundation, we've taken the concept of the Warrior Academy. We're taking this award-winning martial arts character development program, and we're putting it into the biggest slums on the planet. And so, you know, close to 4,000 vulnerable children sponsored. I think that grounds you very much as well. You know, I was in India a couple of months ago, and I was walking through the slums, and we were doing some filming over there, and then meeting some of the new schools we were launching in and so on. And, you know, I'm there with kids who have got absolutely nothing around me. And then I'll get a message from my family back home with kids in Dubai. And it's like, what a contrast, right? And so then I come home and my kids will see the pictures and the videos and the stories. And, you know, I asked, my kid was asked, one of my kids was asked, what does daddy do? You know, what's his job? And, you know, they answered, he helps other kids. That's what he does, right? And I guess that is what I do. If you look at the Warrior Academy from a martial arts point of view, we've got paying members, and that's what we do to support families in the UK. And then we help kids who don't have that opportunity at all, right? And I think that's built into what my kids see. So my kids growing up don't just see us, you know, trying to be commercially successful, but they see that balance with philanthropy.
Yeah.
One of the things I often say to entrepreneurs is, you know, if you're the only measurement you've got of success in your life is the financials, you literally leave half the fulfillment your business can give you on the table. If we just looked at business differently, like your business wasn't this thing that was just meant to make you more money, but it was this thing that you could actually tap into and extract all of this fulfillment in your life, which just changed the way you looked at your own life, and maybe even changed the way you looked at your place within the world.
Yeah, that's very inspiring. I think a lot of business people will pay attention to what you're saying there, because they do it for the money.
Yeah, and do you know what? So this concept of how can we teach a business owner to get more fulfillment in their life?
Yeah,
started 6 months ago, and what I've done with the Bates Foundation is created this group of patrons. And so the patron program is now a 3-year journey that I take entrepreneurs on. And we've got incredible people in this, this patron program, business owners from around the world who are mega successful, sold their businesses for tens of millions, and other business owners who are startups. We've got a huge mixture of people who want more fulfillment from their business, who are purpose driven, love this concept of balancing within their life entrepreneurship and philanthropy, and understand what it can bring them. So every year I host an event in Dubai called Desert Dawn, where we take entrepreneurs on this 24 hours in Dubai, which has got, you know, business mentoring and mastermind, as well as the adventure side of what we're doing and the connecting with each other. We had them, you know, going off into the desert, hot air balloon over the desert at 5 a.m. and all sorts. And then we've got these scholarship tours where we actually show them where their donation goes. So we've got a 1-week tour in Kenya coming up, where we'll go to homeless shelters, orphanages, slum areas, all sorts. And so to join the Patreon program, it's basically a yearly donation to charity. So there's no actual fee. Right. It's just a charity donation. And that then gives you access to what we're doing. So that's something I'm spending a lot of time doing right now. We've only got about 45 spaces on it, and we're about 25 spaces taken. So over the last 6 months, that's what we've been up to. It's really exciting. It's growing arms and legs. And I'm realizing just how incredible that group is. So yeah, if there's any entrepreneurs watching this, then that's a great thing to look into.
I'm sure there will be. Yeah, I hope so. And so your story and everything you've said is truly inspirational. Is there someone that, or a thing that inspires you today, that people you look up to and say, I can keep going, I can keep being better?
It's a really interesting one, isn't it? I mean, I've never really, you know when I spoke to you about motivation and stuff, I've got a very weird relationship with motivation.
Right.
Like I don't really seek inspiration. You know, I like to be have a visionary mindset, but there's no one really I'm looking up to like I want to be them. And, you know, I look at entrepreneurship maybe in a different way to a lot of people. I seek something from entrepreneurship very different. I'm inspired by lots of people, but there's no one I would be like, that's who I want to be. You know, and I think some people could say, yeah, you know, there's this person I want to be like, and this person. I don't really have anyone like that. I'm inspired by lots of people, but I see them for who they are with their own goals. You know, I've got a very different way of looking at that, perhaps. So maybe it's a tricky one for me to answer.
No, it's a good answer, actually. No right or wrong in that answer at all. And when it comes to friends, I read somewhere ages ago, and I might have got these numbers completely wrong, but if my memory serves me correctly, on average, you meet 7,000 people. I think that was a number
really? Wow.
in your life that could be a friend.
Yeah.
And you die with the average of 5 good friends. I've got that from somewhere. Don't quote me on it, but it's stuck in my head for a long time, like years and years, thinking, I think that's probably about right.
Yeah.
Because I look at
Winston Churchill quote.
Yeah. I look at my close friends, and they're from a young age. Yeah. Or through, you know, coming of age, if you like, as well. And I used to play soccer, so I've still got some friends from that era and whatnot. What about you, someone like yourself, very successful? Do you still have time for your old buddies? Are you very careful about who you let into your circle? Because I imagine it's quite a tight circle, and a lot of people want to try and get in there for the wrong reasons. Yeah. And I find that quite a bit. So I'm quite protected. But are you the same in that sense? Do you let people in, or what sort of people do you have in your life that you're close to?
Yeah, I'm very much a small, tight-knit group kind of guy. You know, there's probably under 10 people, maybe under 5 people, under 8 people that I speak to. So my stat might be about right. Yeah, I would definitely say so. Yeah. I think different people seek different things from friendships. That's based on nature and nurture and their personalities. Maybe things their childhood upbringing, whatever it is. For me, and some people really base their relationships on, I need to have, the 6 people around me who've got to really influence me, all this kind of hardcore, like hustle culture stuff. And I just don't really buy into it. I get it, right? You don't want people around you who influence you in a negative way, but to be so selective that you turn down friendships because that person won't help you make more money or whatever, or make you become a better performer. I just don't care about all that sort of stuff. So for me, I've got some deep, genuine friendships with people from, all walks of life, who benefit my life in many ways and I benefit theirs in many ways. And that's a mutual, beneficial relationship. And they've been friends with me for over a decade, right? I think that I've got a very small circle. I'm not the sort of person who likes to go and network. I keep myself to myself. I'm very nomadic and kind of independent. I spend a lot of time alone, even though I've got a family, right? I'm up super early walking. Yeah. I spend a surprising amount of time doing my own thing in my own space. Yeah. And then with a very small group of people around me who I can trust, who are genuine people, who are authentic. And I think that's quite hard to find in this city. Yeah. I think that, the very nature of the huge opportunities you have here does unfortunately attract a lot of people who aren't like that, right? And they're quite superficial with their friendships. And just personally, I find it so hard to maintain a lot of high quality friendships. Whereas a small group, it's easy to maintain that. Yeah. Of course I can, there's friends that I know from 10, 20 years ago that I could bump into and have a drink with, or, a coffee with or whatever, or phone them up, and it'd be like chatting to an old mate from school or something. And, you just click straight away. But I think when it's, it's those you speak to frequently as like a proper friendship, it's a very small group. Yeah, no, and as your family grows, your time gets shorter as well to spend with them, right? I think that's the other thing, isn't it? It's like, maybe that's it, right? I became a dad when I was 27. I'm 34 now. I guess the last 7-8 years have my time has been, I've got less and less time, and I've got less tolerance for meeting up for this or that. It's got a really good reason. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I really appreciate you coming in today. My final question for you would be how you'd like to be remembered when it's all said and done. Legacy is an interesting one, isn't it? Okay, so the way I look at legacy is that we vastly overestimate how long we'll be remembered for. I don't think that we will get remembered past 3 generations very easily. Do you remember your great grandparents and what they did, what they liked, and so on, right? So I don't think necessarily. I think legacy feels like something that's really powerful to talk about up to a certain point, and then you need to be realistic. You're not Genghis Khan. At the end of the day, how long are you going? You're not Julius Caesar. At the end of the day, how long are you going to be remembered? I like the idea that my kids remember me, and that their kids will be able to tell stories about me as well. So from a family point of view, I think that's quite fun and sentimental. But I really believe that legacy is one of those things that it's not what you give your children, the things you give your children, it's what you leave inside them. And I think that the lessons that you give your children are what will be remembered. And I think that the greatest gift you can give your child is an education, but the greatest form of education is character development. And I think the greatest way that I can remember it is through the character of my kids. Yeah, well said. Seb, thank you so much. It's been absolutely incredible. And thank you for being so open and sharing so much with us. And thank you, everybody, for watching or listening to this podcast. If you like it, please remember to like and subscribe to our channels. We're on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. And we've got more icons coming very soon. Thank you. Never waste my time. You are out.